Well, welcome everyone. This is Paul Cronin. The reason you're seeing me instead of the PowerPoints to get started here is because I was advised that people wanted to see what I look like. So as I always forewarn you, be careful what you wish for. So in order to preserve bandwidth and make sure this goes smoothly, I'm actually going to switch the webcam off, but I'll be coming back towards the end, and hopefully if there's any questions, I'll be able to answer them at that time. Thanks, and look forward to seeing you on the other side here. So, we're here to talk about envisioning a dynamic future. I want to thank Kumi and Jennifer for having me speak again today to their people, and I hope for those of you who are listening to this recording that you'll get what you need out of this. If you don't, feel free to reach out to Kumi or Jennifer, and they'll get those questions to me, and I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. So, in the last webinar, we talked more about what was holding business owners back from making their inevitable transition plans. And so today we want to shift more towards a future process, so helping you envision a dynamic future, one that you can't wait to live. So we call this a new approach to leaving your business and achieving peace of mind. So we believe that there are three transition categories. Each are of equal importance. Each has a slightly different path. So, for example, there's business readiness, which relates to having your business be in a place where it is ready to transfer to new control, new ownership, if you will. There's financial readiness, and that relates to your personal, as you as the business owner, your personal financial readiness. Are you able to leave the business? And if you aren't able to leave the business financially where you are today, and you are depending upon income or proceeds of a sale from the business, what do you need to do to your business to increase its value or increase its cash flow so that you can in fact leave? And lastly, of course, is personal readiness, which is really more the kind of work that we do here at Successful Transition Planning. And that has to do with your ability to say, I'm ready to start doing transition planning. I'm emotionally, intellectually ready. I don't have all my plans yet, but I'm ready to do this process. So we ask business owners to think about a variety of things, but I first want to start with, you need to think about accomplishing your process goals. What is the transition process for the business, financial, and personal that you want to achieve? What are those goals? You need to determine if your company can survive. If it's not survivable, it has very little value to anyone else who might want to buy it. In the event that the business could survive without you there, but it can't really thrive and you're depending upon an income stream, once again, it's a major problem and you're going to need to resolve that. You need to think about choosing the transition and transactional advisors, and let me describe the difference. We view what we do as that sort of personal transition, and then there are those involved in transaction. Transition can also be a financial advisor who helps you sort of migrate the financial minefield. Transactional advisors tend to focus on the event, whatever the actual transition of the business is. It could be legal, it could be financial, it could be tax, so on and so forth. And last, you need to think about becoming personally prepared for the transition process. With respect to business planning, you really have to get yourself and your business ready to plan for the transition, which means incorporating other advisors, key employees, and such. You need to help those advisors understand your business so that they can in turn help you create your business transition plan, help you then implement your business transition, and ultimately successfully negotiate the deal or the cash flow or whatever it is that you're going to be depending on as you transition out. Personal planning we believe, involves defining what is a successful transition for you. What kind of goals do you want to achieve as a result of the transition? How ready you are for transition planning. And part of that process involves learning lessons from previous life transitions. We all go through multiple transitions from early life, schooling, perhaps college, perhaps marriage, perhaps children, and so forth. Each of those major life transitions, you were able to have learning experiences. Hopefully you learn from those learning experiences, and we're going to ask you to call upon those experiences and the lessons so that you can then apply some of those to this new transition. It will reduce fear, increase confidence, and ultimately help you become more successful as you transition. So here are 4 key questions. Please take out a pencil and paper. For those of you who are listening to this at home, perhaps you simply pause, but it's worth writing these down. Question 1, when do you want to leave? Question 2, how much money do you need to receive from a business transition? Question 3, who do you think should own the business? Question 4, what will you do with your life after you have left your company? There are many more questions to be asked, but if you start with these 4 today, you will be ahead of most business owners. I know, because I've worked with a lot over the years. There are many emotional rewards of business ownership. There are clearly financial rewards as well. I'd like to ask you to think about and write down what emotional rewards that you get from being a business owner. If it's easier, just write the question down on a piece of paper, think about it, and answer it later. What other rewards or benefits do you get from being an owner? Think about that. Write them down. Now, legacy is a much used word, and we'd like you to think of it in respect of honoring your legacy. So here's a question. As the owner of your company, what have you created or accomplished that you are proud of? What in your company would you like to see continued if you were to leave? Please write those questions down. I think they'll be very valuable to you. There are, of course, limitations of ownership. One of the hardest lessons of owning a business, and I have owned several, is there's only so much time. There's only so many things that you can do. Well, if you own a business, that means that there are things that being owner, simply being an owner, has prevented you from doing. Think about those things. Write them down. Another way to think about it is, what long-held dreams or new opportunities could you pursue if you were able to transfer your company to new owners and you came away with the money you needed for a fulfilling new life? That's a question worth writing down, and it's a question you definitely need to think about answering. So at Successful Transition Planning, unsurprisingly, we have a definition of a successful transition. We think there's 4 key parts. Part 1, you have a plan now for the new life you want to live. 2, you leave your company so that you come away with the money you need for your new life. 3, your company continues successfully after you have left. 4, you are able to live the new life you have designed. Now, the new life is something specifically that our process at STPI, that's where our greatest help is to business owners. However, both Jennifer and Kumi can also help you as they come to this process dealing with the financial and the business transactional piece, all that planning. You need to define personal transition goals. So think about some questions. Are you mentally and emotionally ready to think about leaving your company? If you're blocked, if you can't intellectually and emotionally stop yourself and really imagine that you're going to leave your company someday, it's impossible for you to do any transition planning for the business or yourself, or at least impossible to do effectively. Are you mentally and emotionally ready to create a clear and comprehensive plan for your new life? You have to be willing to say, my current life as I live it today is going to change, end if you will, and then I'm going to need a transition time to do planning, and then I'll be able to start a new life. There's a great book by William Bridges called Transitions. It's really the grandfather of transition planning. I highly recommend everybody take a look at it. Transitions by William Bridges. And he talks about these three zones: the ending, the neutral zone, and the beginning. Last question. Can you create a plan for your new life that will fill your new future with meaning and purpose? Most business owners I know tend to look at their work to generate meaning and purpose. Well, you're going to leave the business someday. Does that mean you have to leave your entire sense of meaning and purpose behind? We think not. And you can create new meaning and purpose in your life if you establish the right plan and you start with the right goals. Your business transition goals are also critical. So you may ask yourself, what changes do you need to make to your company so it can continue successfully without you? Who would be the best new owners for your company? And what legacy would you like to see carried on in the company after you have left? Your financial transition goals. How much money will you need for your new life? Will you need money from your company to support your new life? I know some people who it was not the case. The gentleman owns a very successful business. All of it's a professional services businesses. He's in his late 60s. He has all the money he needs to live his life. He's asked his employees, who would like to take it over? I would give it to you. You just need to promise me that you'll run it. Nobody wanted to take on the responsibility of being CEO. So he's stuck. If he wants to retire, he feels his options are find someone to buy it who may or may not keep the employees, may or may not keep the culture, or turn out the lights, in which case his employees become unemployed. He feels stuck, and he still hasn't resolved that. Another question, how much money will you need from your company, and when will you need it? Because sometimes how much you can extract from the business in a transaction may be much smaller than what you get over time if you have to wait for some period of time to receive it. When we use the word mental, what we're really talking about is intellectual, but your intellectual, your mental and emotional readiness. So here are some questions to test yourself. Have you even thought about leaving your company? Do you have any plans for how you will leave? Do you have any thoughts or plans for what you would do with your company? In other words, who are going to be the new owners? And do you have any thoughts or plans for what you want to do with your life after you left? If you don't you can't answer those questions with confidence, you may really struggle in getting ready to transition. So here's an exercise. Please take out a piece of paper, 4 columns. Title of the first column is event. Column 2 is age. Column 3 is year. Column 4 is lessons learned. And I'd like you to think about a few events that have happened. There were transitions: school, marriage, children, divorce, what have you. You don't have to remember the exact age and the exact year, but pick one. It gives you a fence post, as it were. And write down what the event was. And then really think about what were the key lessons that I learned from that event. And try to do 2 or 3 of these. It's a great exercise, first of all, because it really helps you understand what you've learned from your different transitions. Hopefully it gives you a sense of satisfaction that you've survived all this stuff, 40, 50, 60 years, 70 years of life. But as importantly, it's designed to help give you the confidence that I've learned this much. I can apply these lessons to this new transition, which I've not gone through before. But I have the confidence in knowing that I can do it. And if I plan for it, I can come out the other side with a life that I can't wait to live. So the next exercise we call the identity exercise. And the premise of each question starts with outside of work. So question 1. Please take out a piece of paper if you can and write these down. Outside of work, what do I enjoy doing? Question 2. Outside of work, what gives my life meaning? Question 3. Outside of work, what do I honor and respect myself for? Question 4. Outside of work, what do I admire myself for? Question 5. Outside of work, what do I appreciate about myself? Question 6. Outside of work, what do I like about myself? We have a whole series of other questions when we do workshops like such we're going to be doing down in Bermuda in October. This is a good place to start. I really encourage you to spend some time on this. So a little bit more about your personal financial goals. One question to ask is, will selling your business be necessary to fulfill your personal financial goals? If that's the case, you really need to understand, what is your company worth now? Once you have that established, will the current value of your company be enough to meet your financial transition goals? Very often we find business owners need to spend some time and money to increase the value of their business, the valuation of their business. That increases their ability to make it transferable, period, but also to extract or harvest value from it, either in cash, stock, or earnouts, as the case may be, which is really future cash flow. So here's a slide we work on when we do the workshop, the What's Next workshop, which is the 2-day workshop. So 10 decisions for your future life, which we sometimes also refer to this as the 10 lifestyle areas. But it's a decision you need to make on what will be the primary activity in each one of these 10 lifestyle areas. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, when I retire, I'm going to golf, I'm going to sail, and then I'm going to go snowboarding, and great. Those are all wonderful recreational activities. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm going to, do more reading, do more writing. I want to take up art. I want to take up sculpture or other creative outlets. Well, great. But if all you do is recreational and creative and you ignore all of these other areas, well, you kind of describe what most people call a leisure retirement, sort of like what our grandparents retired to, the guy in the rocking chair. And we really encourage you, don't ignore these other 10 aspects of your life. You'll be selling yourself short. So let's go through at a high level what that's about. When we mean physical health, we mean getting healthy. Losing weight, could be blood pressure issues, all these other things. But in many cases, it's diet and exercise. I'm as guilty of it as the next guy. But as we age, we deteriorate at the cellular level. Our bodies deteriorate. All right? So to counter that, we have to work on making ourselves physically healthier as we age, whether it's weight training or running or jogging or whatever the case may be. It's got to be something that really gets you stimulated, gets you going, builds up some strength to counteract the natural process of life. When we talk about intellectual stimulation, it could be classes, online classes, local classes. It could be book groups, things that really engage your brain. Because when you're out of that regular job ownership workplace, you may find that some things that you do today, you think those are interesting, they're not as challenging. You need something else. You need to reach a little higher. So recreational creative, we talk about, again, that's the typical things one thinks about in recreation. Hiking, camping, so on, golfing, swimming, snorkeling, whatever. Activities with spouse or partner. Well, you better make sure you've got something on a regular basis, because we talked about in the first slide, the rate of divorce among baby boomers is now equal to the rate of divorce of couples in their 20s, and it's continuing to grow. And that can definitely put a big dent in your financial retirement plans. Activities with family really should be separate. Obviously, your spouse may want to tag along, but the idea is think about other members of your family that you may like to spend more time with. It could be your children, your grandchildren. It could be siblings. It could be cousins. Other connections that you may have had as a young person that you couldn't continue on all the time. Or now as your children are grown, that you want to keep integrated with them somehow in their lives. So it's up to you to think about the activities that will work. Residence really refers to where you're going to live. My wife and I, our children are, both in university, probably won't be coming home after they graduate. And we've got this big old house. At some point, we're probably going to need to downsize. We need to really think seriously about what that means. Where would we live? And you need to do the same thing. For those of you who have the financial wherewithal, you may have 2 homes. You may have one home there in Bermuda. You may have another home someplace else when you want an alternate season, as the case may be. Very important to think through that and to work with your spouse or partner. Social connections. This is a huge one. If you think about many of the people you spend time with socially, other than perhaps some neighbors, I'll bet a lot of those connections stem from work. When you leave work, you lose those connections. You lose the meeting someone for coffee in the morning, meeting you for lunch, maybe meeting for drinks after work. Because there is no after work. You've left. You have a responsibility to find new outlets to creating new social connections. Yes, Facebook is wonderful, and Twitter and all the other social media, but it's not the same thing as face-to-face. We all know that. And it's your responsibility to make sure you create new connections, try where you can to maintain old connections, because that is, I believe, part of the essence of being a human being. Spirituality and faith. Now, what faith, we believe, is fundamentally a function of how you connect yourself to this greater universe. Whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, you pick it, and I'm not a judge of any of them. Those are really a process, in our opinion, to connecting to a sense of the universe. Many people are not of faith, and that's great too. But we really encourage people to find an outlet that connects you to the greater universe. If you don't, we think you're shortchanging yourself. Now, some of you may be looking at the next one and saying, income-producing work. Well, I'm selling my business. I don't need another income. And that, in many cases, is exactly true. And that's great. But I wouldn't totally eliminate it, and here's why. I believe that there's an intrinsic value you gain from income-producing work. In other words, you do some work and someone writes you a check, pays you for it. There's something tangible and at the same time intrinsic about that. That's different than volunteering and doing other type of work. The reason is it's another form of making social connections. So we're not saying you have to. Some of you may have to because there's such a financial gap. When you leave the business, you've got to do other things. You may be under contract. You may become some level of management for the new owners. That's all good. But don't just dismiss it out of hand. And the nature of it may likely change. So instead of it being central to your identity, it has a purpose. The purpose is to generate some income. The next piece is volunteer philanthropic, which is what a lot of people think about when they're going to leave their business or sell their company. Oh, I'm going to be on some boards, I'm going to volunteer and this and that. Well, you can volunteer yourself to death. You can get involved in things because you have a hole in your schedule and then you sit back and go, my goodness, why did I get involved with these people? You know, I don't even like the people I'm working with here. So our process is to help you understand this philanthropy, charity, and then the volunteer work which is your time. Each has its own value. And then our process is really about helping you create what is that primary one. What's that primary place you're going to volunteer? What's your primary physical activity? What's your primary spirituality or faith-based activity? What's your primary? The idea is when you have one thing in each one of these areas, even though you may periodically do other things in addition, you're more likely to do and focus on each of the 10 areas consistently. And we believe that's going to help give you a more meaningful and purposeful life. So let's step back and think about your company and your role or roles in it. Most business owners, particularly those who started the company, have lots of different roles. As you grow the business, of course, you have to delegate. If you're going to successfully leave, if you think about it, what you're doing is you're delegating all of your roles to other people, or at least one or two other people. So here's some questions. What activities do you perform now for the successful operation of your company? Just take a sheet of paper out. Write everything you can think of. After you finish that, answer the next question. Can you imagine someone else filling all these roles and successfully running the company? You may find that you're doing the work of 2 or 3 people. You may find that you're doing lots of little things, and those actually could be done better by other people. And that's good, because if you can define what the role of the new owner is, if this person is going to buy it, they probably don't want 2 or 3 jobs. They want 1. Another question. When you think about someone else running your company so it continues to be successful after you have moved on, do you feel pleased, sad, or maybe a little of both? Think about that. Write that down. So in the world of marketing, it's referred to something called buyer personas. And what that really means is someone who's going to ideally buy your product or service. What are the characteristics of this type of person? Marketers love this stuff. And it's really important because it can help focus how you market your product or service and sell it properly, successfully. Well, if you're going to be transferring your business, that's pretty much the same thing. In this case, your company's the product. So what's the buyer persona, or in other words, what's the ideal new owner? So think about what characteristics should this ideal new owner have? What activities would this ideal new owner be doing once they own the business? How will your employees feel about this new owner? How will your customers feel about this new owner? If they're ideal, hopefully all of it's positive, but there could be challenges, and you need to think about those. So going through a personal transition, ultimately you're going to come up with outcomes. So what are some outcome goals? Here's a question you need to ask. What's your desired departure date? Can be one of the most difficult questions for someone to answer. I'm going to leave April 2015, September 2016, and so forth. When you write that down, and by the way, it's September 1st, December 10th, whatever the number is. That becomes a stake in the ground, and that will help you focus on what you need to do between now and then to transition yourself and your business properly. It will also help all of your advisors to understand if it's 6 months away, there's one set of options. If it's 12 months away, you may have more options. If it's 18 or 24 or 36 months away, you may have many, many more options to leave the business successfully, to build up your financial assets successfully. Pick a date, make sure it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, you may have to pick a new date. So, how much money do you want to receive through transitioning your company to new owners? That's an outcome. Another outcome, do you need to be assured that the company continues successfully after you left? In some instances, and this is a bit of a sad story, a gentleman I know built a very successful company. He really had a choice of selling it and making a very nice amount of money, or he could invest in the business and have an opportunity to sell it at a much higher value, or so he thought. This is in the dot-com era, by the way. This is not a young kid, guy in his late 60s. He doubled down. He made a big investment. He thought he was going to get a big multiple. There was only one problem. He bet on product that was actually about to decline in market share, and he bet big, millions of dollars. So he ended up doing what's called splitting the company, a good company and a bad company. The good company had all good assets of the business, which he sold and put the money in his pocket. The bad company had all the bad debts of the company, and those people who owed that money, they were out of luck. The bad company went bankrupt. Sadly, a couple hundred people lost their jobs. Some of those people who maybe have been traveling on business and so forth, they had to fight and sue to get refunded, reimbursed their money. It was awful. But in the end, he didn't care. He only cared about himself. So that was sort of his personal outcome. So what are some outcome goals for your company? For example, do you want the company to, do you want to keep the company in your local community? If you're living in a rural area or where the company is a major employer, if something happens to, if it gets sold and then gets moved out, that will have an impact on your community. Does that matter to you? How much? Then that will impact who buys the business. Do you care about the company continuing to provide local employment? So, similar type of question. Are you concerned about taking care of long-time employees? So, if you are, you should talk to people in the financial and business planning world that they may have various plans that you're not aware of that could take care of these long-term employees, even if, in fact, the company were to be sold and they were to lose their jobs. Other ways of rewarding them, for example. Legacy, as we mentioned earlier, is a big, big issue. So think about some questions. Every company has a culture. So as part of your legacy, do you want the corporate culture to continue? Do you want the company's community or philanthropic involvement to continue? Do you want to be remembered as the founder of the company? And there's a story of a department store here in Boston where apparently the founder of the company, when he sold it, he had this enormous portrait. I think this thing was about 10 feet tall, I swear. And part of the condition of the sale is that portrait would have to remain in the main hallway of the main corporate offices for a certain number of years after he left. And it was there many, many years later. Personally, I think it's a little egotistical, but that was part of the deal. Maybe you don't want that, but if you do want to remember as the founder of the company, how would you incorporate that in your transition goals? You need to think about that. And what are some legacy goals you want to achieve through the business transition process? What in the process of the business transition, what will impact what you feel will be your legacy? There are plenty of logistics. In this case, you may want to ask a couple of simpler ones. Do you want to make a clean break from your company? I want to take the money and run, which, as Kumi will tell you, doesn't often work, but you can sure try. I want to take the money and run so I can move to my new life. Well, that's good, but you've got to make sure it makes sense from a business perspective and a personal financial perspective. So if that's not the case, are you willing to stay on in a management role? This is probably the #1 challenge for most business owners who do, in fact, transition the company. They're often asked to stay on for 12 to 18, 24 months in some case as a consultant. It could, in fact, be part of the earnout that you've got to stay on, and if that's the case, it's probably not a bad idea to make sure the company's hitting its numbers and so forth. But there's a problem. The problem is, if you're the owner of the business today, you have an ownership mentality. When you become a manager, perhaps no longer the central critical manager, the CEO as it were, you have to move from an ownership mentality to a management mentality. You may sell your company to a much larger corporate entity where suddenly there's all sorts of reports and reporting mechanisms and such, and board meetings you need to attend. You have to change your mindset. If you don't, you can have problems that many others have. In fact, there's a famous author in this world called Tom Deans. He wrote a wonderful book called Every Family's Business, and that really has become his new career to talk about his book. And he said that I think it was 18 months that when he sold his company, he had to stay on. He said those were some of the most difficult 18 months of his life. So think carefully about that. So we're going to have another webinar about harvesting your business value, and that's going to be led somewhat more by Kumi. Again, I'm not really a business guru. I now jokingly refer to myself as a recovering management consultant. But more seriously is, if you're going to be harvesting values, here's some central question. Do you want to get all your money up front, or are you willing to be paid out of the new owner's expected future profits or deferred future payments? There's lots of iterations of this, but that's pretty much the combination. So let's talk about a lead advisor. What we mean by a lead advisor is someone who's going to help sort of captain the transition team. Now, it's possible for you to become the lead advisor, but it's not possible for you to be a really effective lead advisor to the transition of your business and an effective CEO operating your business. Invariably, something suffers. Now, you could have a great second in command who can operate the business in your absence, in which case, great. Let her or him do their thing. And you focus on captaining your transition team. More often, you're going to be the COO, CEO, focused on the strategy and execution of the business goals and objectives, and you're going to need to hire somebody to help corral the cats. So as you're doing that, this person has to use their skills and expertise to lead the team of transition advisors. They have to coordinate the diverse efforts of the different kind of advisors. They have to maintain regular communication among the advisors and with you and potentially your management team. They need to respond effectively to new developments because life happens while we're making plans. A little more about the role of the lead advisor. So the lead advisor's role is to ensure that your transition goals are clear and are clearly understood by the members of your transition advisory team. The role is also to ensure that all your team members are using their skills and expertise to help you achieve your goals. And further, the role is to ensure that you and the members of your team can respond effectively to new developments and can work collaboratively to help you revise your plan, if needed, during the course of your business transition process. And in most cases, it will change. So in our last discussion, I put this slide up. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but one of the questions came back and said, okay, you've motivated me, I need to think about this, but who do I hire? What do I do? So let's walk through this in a little greater detail. So when I say make it better, make it matter, make it last, make it happen, it's your goal to make those things happen, but you need to understand the advisor. So when I say make it better, I'm talking about business consultants, marketing consultants, other people who can look at the business objectively and help you understand where are the issues, the problems, the opportunities, and then to create plans to make those changes so that it will increase the valuation of the business, increase the transferability of the business. In other words, it's a better business. Make it matter is what STPI is all about. We have transition planning consultants who can help you understand where you're at, what are some of your fears, how you make decisions, and then take that and apply it to a process which helps you start planning out a future life that we talked about earlier, the 10 decisions. Make it last refers to people such as Jennifer, whose role is really to understand where you're at financially today, if there's a gap between the income stream or the potential selling price of the business, and how do you fill that gap, what options are there, and as importantly, that if you've created this transition plan by working with one of our people or attending our workshop, the What's Next workshop, which we're running in Bermuda there on the 9th through the 11th, then you'll be able to take that information and show it to someone like Jennifer and say, this is what I want to do with my life, and then she or he can help you figure out, is it doable? Is it feasible? If not, what needs to change? So make it happen has to do with what are generally referred to as the transactional advisors. Kumi is an example. A mergers and acquisition advisor. Mergers and acquisition are also an M&A attorney. CPAs who have expertise, accountants who have expertise, and so on and so forth. You may put in a estate planning attorney in this area. So these are people who have to execute the core elements of your plan so that the business transition can occur, so that you can then get the money you need so that you can live the life you want. All of these people have to be around the table, and they have to be focused on that compass in the middle. And the compass is COMP. C stands for clarity, clarity of what you want to accomplish. O stands for opportunities, the opportunities you want to pursue. And then meaning and purpose relates to the life you want to leave. The new life has to give you a sense of meaning and purpose, or it's probably not a life you're going to want to leave. So getting back to the 10 decisions. So as I mentioned earlier, if you attend the workshops, this is the kind of stuff we'll be working with you on. You would spend time with me leading as part of this group, cooperatively working with other people who are there, and helping understand how you make decisions, what are the upsides and downsides of your decision-making style, and then start mapping out and brainstorming, what are areas of what kind of activities could I do in these different areas. Assuming your spouse or partner joins you, what does she or he want? And then over time, you start whittling down. So when you're done, after a couple of days, You've mapped this out. You have made a decision in each one of these core areas. Doesn't mean you can't change it, but it does mean you've got a map. And with a map, you get a much greater sense of reaching wherever you're trying to go. So as we're wrapping up here, I want to remind you that the next webinar is September 30th at 2 p.m. local time there in Bermuda. And what this is a logical approach to building and harvesting value in your business. As I said, this is going to be led somewhat more by Kumi, because that's really his area. I also want to encourage you to take a look at the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/TPBBO, which is Transition Planning for Bermuda Business Owners. And if you were to go there, you would see, I may be able to get out there. I can't, sorry. You would see more information about the workshops. I encourage you to reach out to Jennifer and Kumi to learn more about those. We definitely want to see as many of you there as we can. I'm only there for a few days. And that will help you get more focused and more at a deeper level of what you want to do with your business going forward. So, doesn't seem to be any questions at this point, so if you do have other questions, please reach out to Kumi and Jennifer. They will get those questions to me, and I will be sure to get those back to you. Otherwise, I certainly look forward to seeing you join us on the next webinar. I hope to see many of you down there on the 9th, 10th, and 11th in your beautiful island. Thank you for attending today. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.